Hello, sweet bunnies. I hope you're having a good day today. I'm Amy Jo Claffey, and as a little background, I have a Bachelor of Science in Psychology. I graduated from Boise State University in 2012 as one of the top 10 scholars. Woo! Really representing for the non-trad students on campus. And my emphasis in my degree is on the effects of trauma to the human brain. And the effects are many, and there's many regions of the brain that are affected by trauma. And we are all affected by trauma in our lives. Right now, as a whole world, we're going through COVID. And just the little traumas of having to stay at home and maybe not being able to see someone you would love to see that can bring depression and anxiety. And big traumas of death and losing someone you really love. Going through divorces and breakups at this time or any time is especially hard. For myself, the reason I was interested in trauma and studied it at BSU is I was trafficked as a little girl by my own father to other men, and I was also used in child pornography. I was consumed by fear throughout my whole life and finally sought counseling and started getting help, and then went to college, and I'm a new person because of a couple decades of very, very hard work to get through the trauma. But it is possible. And so for my first video in this new series, I'm going to be focusing on the thing that really helps, I think, the most to process trauma, and that is journaling. When I went to my first therapist, her name was Juanita, bless her heart, she said I was in a trance the first day that I went there, and I was wearing my daughter's shoes because my brain could not be taxed with finding my own shoes. It was an impossibility. And she brought out a stack of her journals that she was so proud of. She also had been sexually abused by, I think it was a pastor. Anyway, she had also been sexually abused. It's an epidemic. And so she was really proud of this huge stack of journals. And she asked me if I ever had journaled. And I told her that I did. And she asked me to bring a journal. And she burst out laughing when she read it because I was not journaling from my stream of consciousness. When you journal, you need to be sure that you're not editing yourself. This is what you can burn it later if you need to. But this is one place where you can tell exactly what you're thinking, exactly how mad you are at somebody, exactly how betrayed you feel, exactly how lazy or unproductive you feel, exactly how sad or unworthy you feel. This is the place to not edit. So you write what comes to your mind, whatever it is. I'll get a little bit more into that later. But she really helped me to face into what had happened to me. It was something I just couldn't face. It was too hard. It was too scary. It was too terrifying. I went through things as a little girl that no human should have to go through. And I'll tell parts of my story as we go, but you get the idea just from knowing that I was trafficked and used in child pornography. And the fact that I can talk about it is a testament to how well journaling works. And you can get there too, whatever the trauma is that you're trying to sort through. So I'm going to share a study every day because, as my kids say, I have 5 kids and 2 beautiful grandchildren. And as my kids say, I love studies, and I do. Also, I should say too, I'm happily married to my soulmate, Tim. So anyway, And of course, a happy marriage includes arguments and everything else. That's just part of the human condition. I don't want anybody to think that, oh, she's happily married and I fight all the time. No, it's just part of what we go through as humans. It's quite a condition, actually. So every day I'm going to tell a study. And today the study I'm going to tell you about was done in 1988, and it's been replicated many times, which is an important thing for a scientific study to be replicated so that it's not just a one-off, that it is a truth of human nature. Well, as close as you can get to that. So this guy, Dr. James Pennebaker, PhD, in 1988, he took a group of college students, and you try to have a control group and then a group that you are going to experiment with, whether it's with medications or a certain behavior, whatever you are studying. And in this study, he divided the college students into two groups. The control group was asked to just write down some things that happened to them that day, some mundane things, everyday things, nothing consequential. Just write down what your plans are, what you've been doing. The other group was asked specifically to write the worst thing they had gone through, their worst personal experience. And one sidebar of the study that Pennebaker commented on was how sad it was reading the worst thing that these people had gone through. And we are a sisterhood and brotherhood of bunnies that have gone through some pretty shitty stuff. And nobody gets through unscathed. If you have a beautiful, marvelous life with no poverty or sickness or anything else, you're going to lose your grandparents or your parents. Life is hard and we get through it. And this is one of the ways, is by journaling. So he had these two groups write for 4 days. They wrote, and then every day he collected their writings. And then 6 weeks, and he did some studies on them. He studied their cortisol levels, and so their stress hormone levels, and different physical studies. And he also had them write down how they were doing, a questionnaire about their lives and their anxiety levels, depression levels, happiness levels, everything. Then he came back 6 weeks later and studied those two groups of people, the students that he had studied. And even at the molecular level, when studying their stress hormones and so forth, the people in the group that had written about their trauma had improved in, I have it written down, in immune function on a cellular level. The group that wrote their trauma. They also had less depression, less anxiety, less visits than the control group to the student health center. See if I'm forgetting anything. They had more positive moods and fewer illnesses. This was from writing their most traumatic event. Every day for 4 days for 30 minutes. So, and I have other studies to show you later in the week. Writing your pain is incredible. And I have PTSD. It's now being called PTSS sometimes, from everything I've been through, which comes with flashbacks, anxiety, depression, insomnia. I've worked a lot on it, and I have a lot of improvements, but I still struggle with some of these things occasionally. And so science has shown over and over through multiple studies that I will be sharing that the best way to process trauma, whether you're a vet that has been in war or a child that was trafficked or molested, or if you've gone through rape, sexual assault, if you are a minority in any country, the minority carries a load of depression and anxiety that the majority population does not carry. This includes women, and it includes any minority, whatever the minority is in the country. Like here in America, this is the Black people, the brown people, and in every country it is the LGBTQ. They carry a load of anxiety and depression that we in the majority population don't experience, because we don't experience the little prejudices and racism that come into everyday living and that we don't have to process. But the Black people and brown people and any minority in any country does have to process that. So that's one of the cognitive loads that can be lightened by journaling. And studies have shown it. Some of the studies, people who journaled about losing their job were quicker to find new jobs. It processes trauma, reduces stress, improves immunity, improves your physical health. Journaling is really helpful. And I'm going to cover different ways of journaling, but today I'm going to talk about the easiest way, and that is through your stream of journaling, your stream of consciousness. And I don't know if I finished saying, but science has shown that the way to process the trauma that we all have is by telling your story in a safe place. And what could be safer besides a pen and paper, and it's just you and your story that you're writing down. And if your brain gets sidetracked, you just let it. You just write that down too. You write down whatever comes into this brain, because it needs to do an unload, a dump of the trauma. Another safe place is in counseling. Always trust your therapist. If you have any weird feeling about your therapist, don't go again. I had a weird therapist. I've had several therapists, and one of them was a dud, and she was not helpful. And I tried to keep going to her for a while, and I learned a lesson that often when our voices are silenced as children, that's okay in our minds. That's what we live with. So we just let a counselor silence us or debunk us. And so if you're uncomfortable with a therapist, go to a new one. But that is a very safe place. EMDR is a form of treatment that uses the side-to-side function of our left and right brain to either tap or watch your therapist's finger and process some of this trauma. So find a trusted therapist. There's always help in any community if you can't afford it. And watching things like this is very helpful. Talking to a trusted relative, close friend. Anytime you tell your story, you are going to process some of that trauma, and your brain is going to settle down a little. Our trauma isn't stored in one place in our brain. It's stored in the amygdala, the hippocampus, so many other different centers of the brain, some association areas, the prefrontal cortex, all carries a part of the trauma, and it's fragmented. That's why sometimes people even forget horrible trauma that they've been through, because the brain, you can't survive with that kind of trauma every day, especially if you're a child. So we're going to put everything together in this COVID season and everything that's going on politically, and in every nation there's upheaval, and every human is going through trauma. And so we're going to buy a notebook and a pen that we like. If we can afford it, if not, we're going to find a notebook around the house and an old pen. Who cares? But if you can't afford it, it's nice to get yourself spend a little of your money, because that will often motivate us to do something. And then select a time, first thing in the morning, last thing at night, on your lunch break, a time that works for you, and sit down and write what comes from your stream of consciousness. Now, when Juanita laughed at my journal, it was because I was journaling as if some future somebody was going to uncover this amazing tome and want to, publish it or something. And I wanted to sound good. So I had written things like, I cannot sleep, and I know that I am on the night watches, and I am supposed to be praying for people that, instead of saying, fuck, I can't sleep, I'm having problems, my brain is dissolving in front of my eyes. So you learn, the first thing you need to learn is to journal whatever you are thinking. Do not censor yourself at all. Don't put a pretty spin on it. That's not necessary. Right? If you can't think, like if you're a blank, like if you've walled yourself and your trauma and everything off so much, and when I say trauma, please don't think, well, I don't have trauma. One thing I like to say is everyone's own worst nightmare is their own worst nightmare. Being picked up late at school and the fear that came with that could be your worst nightmare. And then that's what your brain is dealing with. So you need to deal with that. And don't diminish your own pain. The walks we've taken are sacred. We've gone through things that no one else has gone through. And it's sacred. Don't come down on yourself for anything. Just write. If you can't think, if you're so walled off because you're afraid of it, like I was afraid of my trauma, I was walled off completely, then write the words I feel, and write how you feel physically, not emotionally. I feel like some of my first journals, I would write, I feel, I called it zhuzhing, up and down my neck and up and down my arms, just this terrible, anxious, like anxiety in my bones. So write exactly what you are feeling. And sometimes I've had to draw things like a little stick figure, which I should get some of my journals out so I can show you some of the drawings and stuff. And then draw a stick figure throwing rocks and make the rocks big enough that you can write words in them. And then force yourself to write a feeling in every one of those rocks. And by the way, you decide what you're throwing rocks at. Your hurdle, your obstacle, the thing that's in your way right now. Have that be what your little stick person is throwing the rocks at. And then write down. Fill in every one of those. Get out a thesaurus. Oh, well, obviously, open the thesaurus on your phone. And, I know I feel worried. Look up the word worry and fill your stones with that. It's going to exponentially help you dig deeper into what you're really feeling. Okay, so that's your assignment for today then is to get a notebook and a pen and start writing down the worst thing that has ever happened to you. And this is going to help you be healthier, happier, less stressed. Your life will be improved in any way that it needs to be. So I'm very looking forward to telling you the next study tomorrow and hoping that you have a marvelous day. I'm a singer-songwriter, and my album Lost Acorn is available anywhere that you can stream or download music. So do a search for Amy Jo Claffey or Lost Acorn. It would really help me if you downloaded or streamed my music. And then I can keep doing this and bringing you hope for your life. So hop off to your day, sweet bunnies. And remember that you are loved, worthy, creative, infinitely capable, and badass. Bye.